Well, I'm looking forward to speaking about healing trauma through the experience of allying ourselves with psilocybin, who I'll often refer to as grandmother psilocybin or grandmother mushroom or mama mushroom. And some of the reasoning behind that is I find that the intimate connection and recognizing that our plant allies are imbued with spirit and they're alive helps me to be in deeper relationship with that experience of communion. And certainly that's come through years of working with different herbal medicine and plant medicine and time with grandmother ayahuasca or grandfather Huachuman. The deepening of recognition that there's support through some of these plant medicine allies and the curiosity of how that can guide us in a good way and deepening our understanding of who we are. And so, with the awareness that our plant medicine allies, grandmother psilocybin in particular, guides us in deepening into our sensory awareness so that we can come into balance with who we are, what has come to pass, what is here now, what we're birthing, in such a way that we generate a regulated and healthy nervous system. And so the reason why I'm wanting to have this conversation through I don't necessarily say the lens of trauma, with the understanding that we can bring a deeper sense of healing, awareness, and presence to what has come to pass in our lives through relationship with Mama Mushroom is because the elements of our lives in which we have not brought into a place of reconciliation or balance are what ends up impeding our freedom. And so if our greater intention in any of our paths of awakening or coming into peace and balance with who we are is the recognition that what is out of balance binds us, then we have an opportunity through our work with plant medicine and with psilocybin in particular to do some investigation, some self-inquiry as to what are the energetics that are binding us. What are the aspects within our own felt sense that are keeping us from being able to be fully present in our body and inasmuch fully present in our lives. So one of the backstories behind this that many of you have worked with, many of you before are familiar with, is that in my own journey of healing, my mother was brutally raped and murdered when I was about 20 years old, 31 years ago. And through the course of time, I needed to learn how to digest that, how to metabolize it, how to integrate it. How can I be with the truth of what I cannot change in such a way that it allows me to come into a place of freedom within my own life, right? Like, what do we do with the stuff that we cannot change? I think that's the bigger question for all of us, right? What do we do with what we know is here, and how do we come into healthy relationship with it? And over the course of time, this led me to work with psychedelics from a ceremonial point of view in my 30s. I had worked with psilocybin and LSD in my teens. And at the time, I certainly would not have called it working with it. I would have called it getting fucked up for a good deal. And the byproduct of that was that I did have some intensely spiritual experiences that really marked my life. And so as time went by and I was sitting with and metabolizing this trauma of my mother's death, amongst some of my other human challenges, I discovered the ceremonial use of plant medicine and the great piece of empowerment that came through that is that they offered up this opportunity to feel, find, and discover for myself what was out of balance within my own system through working with the sensory parts of my journey, the mythic parts of my awareness, and find the wherewithal to do something different. And the fact of the matter is that through a lot of our journey, what has caused grief and trauma is often avoided, denied, or shoved into the wayside of our journey. And we don't live in a society or a world where there are often resources presented in a good way that help us to be with grief and trauma. A lot of it is focused on avoidance, on medicating, on getting rid of the symptoms that are keeping us from being present in our life. But the fact of the matter is that the symptoms that are keeping us from being present in our life are there because it's our body talking to us. It's our system asking us to pay attention, whether it's depression, belief patterning, triggers and activation. All of these are ways that your body is talking to you. So when you are deciding to embark on a journey with psilocybin, with that intention to address grief or trauma, the foundation of that needs to be rooted in the awareness that you are capable of healing yourself. You are able to do hard things. You can be with what is hard. You can be with what feels like it's going to tear you apart, and that you are actually the only one who can do that for yourself. Any of the pieces that we ignore, deny, avoid, or run away from end up feeling like they're chasing us over the course of time. The more years that we gather, the more we start to recognize, there's this piece there from when I was 5 or when I was 10 or my teenage self or from this particular grief. And even though I did all of these things that I thought was working with it, instead, what has come to pass is I have some really great strategies for managing it, but haven't actually gone into the deep visceral work of alchemizing it. Working with grandmother psilocybin with the intention to alchemize trauma means you have to feel the hard things. And so it means that from a ceremonial point of view, you're not necessarily having an experience where you're connecting with the great remembering of your divine self. You're in a state of ecstatic bliss, and that higher consciousness is showing you the purpose and the meaning of everything that's come to pass. And hallelujah, amen. Often what's happening is that you're sitting down and having tea with your life's greatest disappointment, your sense of failure, your terror, your fear, your raw, gut-wrenching grief, so that it can be acknowledged and witnessed and met within your own body. And when we meet it within our own body, it changes. So the challenging thing for us as humans is that we want to be able to quantify an outcome that qualifies the reason why we're going to have an experience. Right? Anybody notice that? Like, okay, if I'm going to do this, then what's it going to look like? And what am I going to get at the end of it? How am I going to know that it's going to work? What are the pieces that will give me a guarantee? And we don't have any of those guarantees when we're working with psilocybin, other than the awareness that we're going to have an experience of going into ourselves. And through that experience of going into ourselves, we're going to have an opportunity to be with our belief patterning, our reactions, our responses to ourselves and the world, and investigate what is in need of coming into a place of balance, often through feeling really challenged. Feeling really challenged can include vomiting, wailing, releasing from our nervous system. And so, what we do know is that we're going to have an experience of connecting with ourselves. Our opportunity is to welcome the hard things that are arising, because the hard things that are arising are metaphorical of the hard things that have come through our life's journey. And when we recognize that we have the capacity to be present with the hard things that have come through our life's journey, our response to that in our nervous system changes. It changes. What we tend to be reacting to in the day-to-day is coming from the historical trigger from our unaddressed grief and trauma. And so with grandmother psilocybin, we're creating an experience on purpose that is hard, maybe painful, might feel traumatic, intense, all of those pieces on purpose in a safe setting with some variables that are under our control, right? Your facilitator, your being warm, having enough water, like some variables that are under our control, so that as we go inwards, we can change our relationship with how we have perceived what came to pass and investigate through our connection with spirit what we can do differently. I think that's something that all of us are seeking when we reflect on the components from our life's journey where we feel stuck. What is a different point of view that I can gather in my awareness where I can see this differently or be with it in a different way? And we're inundated with spiritual practices and ideology that actually often still focus on the avoidance of being with what's hard. I was speaking with a friend of mine about this yesterday on my drive here, and reflecting on how often when we're on an intentional spiritual path, we have this awareness from a more omnipotent point of view that we chose these life lessons, that what is coming through our hardship, we have an opportunity to gather up some rich medicine for our soul. And there's much to be learned from these parts of our journey. We want things to be black and white, yes? We want to know that this is the way. Whereas what's true on our conscious path is that we can have an awareness that there is a great teaching for this in me, but not at the cost of avoiding feeling what it means to you to have been hurt, to have gone through loss, to have been betrayed or abandoned, whether it's by someone else or by yourself. We still have to feel these things. And in order to feel them, we have to let go of our idea of what the outcome is that we're going to get from going through that sensory experience. And in that letting go of the outcome, place our faith or our trust within our own higher self and in our relationship with spirit, with our source, with curiosity. Okay, this thing is here. This thing is here that I've spent 50 years trying to get away from, and it's still here. Or despite all the grief work that I felt like I did and likely did do around X, Y, and Z, there's still this piece in my nervous system. How can I be with it differently? And so that this includes being willing to walk into uncertainty. And in that faith, trust that we can find our own center as we are allowing for the emotional work or the mental work that needs to come through in the experience to be met. And it's the meeting of that within ourselves that helps us to discover the alchemy that leads to some sort of shift in perspective, some sort of new way of feeling ourselves and feeling our world. That's a question that all of us need to be conscious of in working with psychedelics, period. And to do your research when you're choosing a facilitator. And so when you're embarking on a journey, perhaps taking some time to sit with yourself and consider what are some of the tenets that are important for me in ceremony to feel safe and to know that container is held in such a way that I can safely go inwards and listen. And that piece is really big, right? That piece is really big. And it's a part of the ceremonies that I hold. The ceremonies that I share with grandmother Psilocybin are similar in some ways to traditional ayahuasca ceremonies in that everybody is laying down and going inwards for about 5 hours. And I hold space with singing or using musical instruments and sound and toning through that awareness that we really need that time to savor and listen to what is showing up. The truth of the matter is that what is unaddressed within our life's journey is held in our bodies. And sometimes it can take that whole 5 hours, it can be in the last hour that we start to discover because we're finally not fighting ourselves. You know, the first couple of hours in ceremony, a lot of resistance can show up because we can't undrink the tea. And our egos have 500 reasons why we need to go into protection mode. And some of those are true. There was times in all of our lives where we needed to go into protection mode. And part of opening to an experience with grandmother psilocybin is allowing for surrender. And if we're going to surrender, we have to feel safe. And if we're going to recognize that we don't have control over some of those variables that are showing up, like that intense stimulation in our nervous system, or the variability of visions that can be coming forth in those first few hours, it takes time throughout the course of a journey with grandmother in order for us to really soften and come into stillness and give ourselves permission to really be in that place of listening. We have a tendency in Western culture to jump out of stillness as fast as we can. Almost like there's an assumption that's not productive. Oh, where's all the things? Where's the stimulation? I can't be still. Yet it's in the stillness that we're able to hear what Spirit's telling us. It's when we shut up for long enough and get out of our own way that we can listen. I want to speak a little bit more about how we hold trauma in the body. And quite often, I've noticed over the course of time that this is, in many people, it's pelvis, lower back, hips. Our biggest holding patterns seem to be hanging out in that part of our body. And certainly it can be in other parts as well. And over the course of our lifetime, we really get great at managing where we're holding this pain in such a way that we often can't even feel or notice that it exists. And then you're in a psychedelic journey or in a meditation where you're like, where did this come from? Why is this here? What? How did this happen? Yet it's over the course of years that we gather that we're holding ourselves in certain ways or managing ourselves in a certain way that we become blind to what we're carrying. And we have so many practices that take us out of the body. When we're working with grandmother psilocybin, we come into the body. And that is often what is so uncomfortable in those first 2 hours, which often referred to as when you're coming up, because you're in the body and your felt sense is engaged and you can't shut it off. And so the intensity, whether it's discomfort in the pelvis, whether it's the unaddressed grief or trauma, whether it's the shadow patterns that are needing to be acknowledged and faced, they're not going away. And this is that opportunity to meet them. So how do we be with, this is one of our, I think, living questions that we can be asking ourselves in our day-to-day life. How do we be with what we cannot change in such a way that we can alchemize it to create medicine for ourselves? And what does it even mean to alchemize something to create medicine? Because certainly from a Western culture framework, that can give us this notion that if we do this thing, we're going to get this thing. Right? And that can appear really linear. And for any of you that have worked with plant medicine in any shape or form, you know it's anything but linear. But there's this idea, if I do this thing, I'm going to get this thing. If we allow ourselves to think from a much more felt sense awareness, and instead it's, I am going to go inwards and be with what is arising in my soul right now, today, that feels important for me to notice. I'm going to go inwards and I'm going to be with what is arising today. Even if before your ceremony, you have a specific intention. You might have a specific intention. I need to address the grief around my brother's death. And then you go into a ceremony and you don't see your brother. It has nothing to do with your brother. It's about something else entirely, because we are trusting the wisdom of our partnership with the spirit of grandmother psilocybin, our own spirit, and our connection to source. And those relationships hold a perspective that is far greater than what we can fathom in our own human consciousness. And so there's that willingness. Let me go inwards and be with myself today and what is arising for me today. And this is a practice that is not just for plant medicine. This is a living question or a practice that we can bring to our journaling, our meditation, any of our self-awareness practices, to give ourselves permission to acknowledge and be with what's true for us each day. We need to give ourselves permission without changing it, without it needing to be something that's prettier, more spiritual, more enlightened, whatever the mode of comparison that often can show up in our critical inner voice. So giving ourselves permission to be with what's alive and arising today. Sometimes we have this idea, healing and journey implies a destination. That our work will be done, we'll have figured things out, we'll have the answers, we'll be healed. I don't even actually like using the word healing journey that much anymore because it implies that you're going to get somewhere and you're going to be done, right? What we're actually doing is learning to be present. And the more present we are, the more we're able to be inclusive of all parts of ourself without reacting from a place of old trauma stories and dysregulation. Not to say that dysregulation in our nervous system is a goal either. You're going to get dysregulated. The investigation is, how do we be with this? And so this is another aspect of working with grandmother psilocybin that helps us to learn skills in being with intensity. And because you can't get away from the intensity in that first hour or two because you drank the tea, you have to find a different resource other than running away from yourself, which is, how can I breathe into what is here? How can I welcome home the parts of myself that I've lost or avoided? How do I acknowledge this old pain actually is still in my body, even though I thought that I did all the right things for it to be done? Like, how do I actually tell the truth? How do I tell the truth about who I am and align more fully what I'm recognizing in that truth with how I live my life each day? So this is why I've often referred to grandmother psilocybin as no bullshit medicine or truth medicine. We can see our lies. Not only can we see them, we feel them, right? We feel them. We're like, oh, that's where I was tricking myself. That's where I was trying to tell myself I was okay with this relationship in my life or with this job or this way of living or this old trauma that is still haunting me. Truth is, this is here. Okay, shadow. Okay, part of myself that I've hated or don't like. How do I be with you and still open my heart? How do I change the historical circumstances where I have discerned that these experiences give me permission to shut my heart? That they give me the reason why I'm allowed to defend or protect? The truth is the more vulnerable that we can get with ourselves, the more honest we are. The more honest we are, the more at home we are in our bodies. If we're at home in our bodies, we're at home in our families and our communities, and likely can have an impact on what is unfolding on our planet. I remember having this experience of watching the sunrise. I was probably about 16 years old. And I couldn't believe from my felt sense, the power of my spirit in my body. I couldn't believe how huge it was and that it could be in this tiny little physical form. And I was just marveling over the wonderment, the awe of this as I was watching this sunrise on one fine November morning. I think it was actually might have been my 16th birthday too. And that awareness, because through having the experience with the psychedelic, then became imprinted in my nervous system. This is where I want to talk a bit about integration. It became imprinted in my nervous system. So I knew on a sensory level that who I am is so much more than I can ever fathom in my human reckoning. So much bigger than this little body. And that awareness supported me through traumatic and challenging experiences that helped me to see the bigger picture. because I recognized even though there were hard things that were unfolding, who I was also more than that. It gave me, on many levels, the capacity to be with some of those hard things. Whenever we are integrating from our plant medicine journey, we are given imprints that show up in our nervous system that are like little, it's like truth speak, little elements that just resonate. And here I am. This is that part of myself that I've always known. And this is some of that wisdom that comes through when I connect with that part of myself. In our day to day, when we're out of ceremony, our work is allowing for that part of ourselves to help form the framework of how we engage with life. And so, how will we do that? We're engaging with life, we are having challenging human experiences, whether that's from people cutting you off on the highway to pressures in family life, pressures in work life. Integration needs to be something practical that you can bring into a day to day. My encouragement is that you make a connection with the sensation that showed up in your felt sense. I'll often call it in your remembering, and that you bring it into the present moment of your day to day. And it can be with just a few breaths. Here's this really hard thing right now. And that's right. I remember that I am actually, to use my example, this vast spirit in this simple human body. And that awareness gives me a sense of spaciousness that helps me to be with the conflict or the challenge that's in front of me so that I can meet what is showing up in my human day to day differently. That's what we're seeking, is we're seeking the components. They're like little seeds. And we carry them out of a plant medicine ceremony. And then it's our job to plant them and nurture them, which means that we have to bring them into the practical and into the recognition that the sacred lives within us in our day-to-day human experience. The self-inquiry of how do I tend to those? How do I feed this awareness of my connection with spirit? Often people will have connections with their ancestors in a plant medicine journey. How do you feed that connection with your ancestors? How do you feed that connection with the forest people, with your helping spirits, guides, with any of the components that might come through a journey for you in a way that can offer sustainability and uplift and change your human experience? So these are pieces that I really want to encourage you to ask yourself when you're walking away from a plant medicine journey, because certainly many of you have either journeyed with me or with others in different parts of the world. And the integration is how we live it, is how we bring it home. And it needs to be tangible and not separate from the journey that we're having in the day to day. It's not separate from that. When I started going to Peru to work with ayahuasca, 2009, I would come home and my kids were little. My twins would have been 9 and my son would have been 5, 4. And so life was full on when I got home. There wasn't a break. And it was very much integrating what had shown up on this deep soul level in however I met what might be considered the mundane in the day to day. So, integration from plant medicine ceremonies is us mapping the space between the mystery and the mundane because they're not separate from each other. And when we can map that space between the mystery and the mundane, we're able to recognize how our journeys with the sacred inform what is happening before us. It informs our parenting. It informs any of the ways that we're relational. It informs how we show up for ourselves outside of ceremony. It's not simply one ceremony, a few months later, another ceremony, and then another ceremony, and that's where you have the spiritual experience. The spiritual experience is what you're doing every day as you live and breathe. And so thank you all. I hope to see you in Circle. I know I will see some of you soon. Enjoy the rest of your day.